Alexander Chen sat in his bedroom on the third floor of the biggest house in Beverly Hills. The room was huge, bigger than most people's entire homes. It had everything a young man could want. There was a king-size bed with silk sheets that cost more than a car. The walls were covered with expensive art that Alexander had never seen. There were shelves full of books in Braille that no one else in the house could read. But Alexander felt like a prisoner in his golden cage. He was 22 years old and had been blind since birth. His father, Richard Chen, was one of the richest men in America. Richard owned a technology company that made billions of dollars every year. Everyone knew the Chen name. Everyone respected Richard Chen, but Richard did not respect his own son. Alexander heard footsteps in the hallway outside his room. He knew those footsteps well. They belonged to Maria, one of the house servants. She had worked for the family for 10 years. Alexander listened as Maria talked to another servant in the hallway. "Poor boy," Maria whispered. "Stuck in that room all day. Mr. Chen never spends time with him." "It's not our business," the other servant replied. "Mr. Chen pays us well to keep quiet, but the boy is so lonely. He just sits there listening to music all day." "Shh. Mr. Chen doesn't like us talking about Alexander. He says the boy is different." Alexander felt his heart sink. Even the servants pitied him. He was not just blind. He was also a disappointment to his father. Richard Chen had built an empire, but his only son could not even see it. The footsteps moved away and Alexander was alone again. He reached for his headphones and put them on. Classical music filled his ears. It was the only thing that made him feel better. When he listened to music, he could forget about his father's cold words. He could forget about the way people looked at him with pity. Alexander had learned to play piano when he was 5 years old. His father had hired the best teachers money could buy. "Maybe if you can play well enough, people will forget about your problem," Richard had said. Even then, Alexander knew his father was ashamed of him. The music teachers came and went. Some were kind. Others treated Alexander like he was stupid just because he could not see. They would speak slowly to him, as if being blind meant he could not understand normal speech. They would move his hands on the piano keys roughly, getting frustrated when he made mistakes. "No, no, no," one teacher had shouted. "You must feel the music. You must see it in your mind." But how could Alexander see anything? He had been born in darkness, and darkness was all he knew. His father's voice echoed in the hallway. Richard was talking on his phone, as he always was. Business never stopped for Richard Chen. "The quarterly reports look good," Richard was saying, "but we need to be more aggressive in the Asian markets. I don't care what it takes. I want those contracts signed by next week." Alexander had heard these conversations 1,000 times. His father lived for business. Money and power were the only things that mattered to Richard Chen. Alexander wondered if his father had ever loved anything that could not make him richer. The bedroom door opened. Alexander did not need to see to know who it was. He could smell his father's expensive cologne. He could hear the way Richard's leather shoes clicked on the marble floor. "Alexander," Richard said. His voice was cold like it always was when he spoke to his son. "We need to talk." Alexander took off his headphones and turned toward his father's voice. "Yes, Father. The annual charity gala is next week. 500 of the most important people in the city will be there. Politicians, business leaders, celebrities. Everyone who matters," Alexander nodded. He had heard about these galas his whole life, but he had never been allowed to attend. Richard always said it was better if Alexander stayed in his room during important events. "This year will be different," Richard continued. "You will perform at the gala." Alexander felt his stomach drop. "Perform? You will play piano for our guests. It will show them that the Chen family supports people with challenges. It will be good for business." "Father, I don't think I'm ready for that, playing for so many people." "You have been taking piano lessons for 17 years, Richard interrupted. "If you are not ready now, you never will be." Alexander wanted to explain that playing alone in his room was different from playing for hundreds of strangers. He wanted to tell his father that he was scared, but he knew Richard would not listen. Richard never listened to Alexander's fears. "What piece would you like me to play?" Alexander asked quietly. "Something impressive, something that will make people talk. I want them to remember this performance." After Richard left, Alexander sat on his bed and tried not to cry. He was 22 years old, but sometimes he felt like a small child again. His father only noticed him when there was something to gain from it. This performance was not about Alexander's talent. It was about making Richard look good in front of important people. Alexander had spent his whole life trying to make his father proud. He had learned to read Braille faster than most people could read regular books. He had studied business and economics, hoping that one day Richard would let him help with the company. He had practiced piano for hours every day, even when his fingers hurt and his back ached from sitting at the bench. But nothing was ever good enough for Richard Chen. The house felt empty and cold, even though it was full of servants and expensive things. Alexander's mother had died when he was 3 years old. He barely remembered her, but Maria had told him that she was kind and gentle. She had loved Alexander completely, blindness and all. Sometimes Alexander wondered what his life would have been like if she had lived. Would she have protected him from Richard's coldness? Would she have loved him just for being her son? Not for what he could do or achieve. Alexander stood up and walked to his window. He could not see the view, but he knew what was there. The house sat on 5 acres of perfectly maintained gardens. There was a swimming pool that no one used and tennis courts that gathered dust. Beyond the gates was the city of Los Angeles, full of millions of people living their lives. Sometimes Alexander wondered what it would be like to leave this house. To walk down a normal street and talk to normal people who did not know his last name. People who would not look at him with pity or treat him like a broken toy. But where would he go? He had never been anywhere alone. He had never had a real friend. The only world he knew was this cold, empty mansion where he was more like a pet than a son. The charity gala was 1 week away. Alexander would have to stand in front of 500 strangers and perform. He would have to smile and pretend to be grateful while people stared at him like he was a circus act. But maybe, just maybe, if he played well enough, his father would finally be proud of him. Maybe Richard would finally see that Alexander was more than just a disappointment. Alexander picked up his headphones again and lost himself in the music. It was the only place he felt safe. The only place where being blind did not matter. In the world of music, he could be anyone he wanted to be. He did not know that in 1 week everything would change. He did not know that his worst moment would lead to his greatest discovery. He did not know that a homeless girl with magic fingers would show him what real music could do. For now, Alexander Chen was just a lonely young man in a golden cage, dreaming of a freedom he had never known. The night of the charity gala arrived like a storm Alexander could not escape. All week he had practiced the same piece over and over. Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major. It was a beautiful song, but now Alexander hated every note of it. The mansion was full of people and noise. Alexander could hear cars pulling up to the front door every few minutes. Expensive cars with quiet engines and doors that closed with soft clicks. He could hear voices in the hallway below his room. Rich voices talking about business deals and vacation homes and stock prices. Maria came to his room to help him get ready. She had been quiet all week ever since she learned about the performance. Alexander could tell she was worried about him. "You look very handsome," Maria said as she fixed his black tie. Her voice was gentle, like she was talking to a scared child. "Your suit fits perfectly." Alexander's hands were shaking. He tried to hide it, but Maria noticed everything. "Mr. Alexander," she whispered, "you don't have to do this if you don't want to." "Yes, I do," Alexander replied. "Father expects it. Your father expects many things. That doesn't make them right." Before Alexander could answer, Richard's voice boomed from downstairs. "Alexander! It's time!" Maria squeezed Alexander's hand. "I will be watching from the kitchen door. You are braver than you know." Alexander walked down the marble staircase, his hand sliding along the smooth banister. He had walked these stairs thousands of times, but tonight they felt different. Each step took him closer to something he did not want to face. The ballroom was full of sound. 500 voices talking and laughing, the clink of champagne glasses, the soft sound of expensive shoes on marble floors. Alexander could smell perfume and cologne and the flowers that decorated every table. "There he is," Richard's voice cut through the noise. "Ladies and gentlemen, my son Alexander." The talking stopped. Alexander felt 500 pairs of eyes looking at him. He could not see them, but he could feel their stares like heat on his skin. Someone started clapping, and soon the whole room was applauding. But it did not sound like real appreciation. It sounded like politeness, the kind of clapping people do when they feel sorry for someone. Richard put his hand on Alexander's shoulder. His grip was tight, almost painful. Alexander has been studying piano since he was 5 years old, Richard announced to the crowd. Tonight he wants to share his gift with all of you. It's amazing what someone can achieve when they refuse to let their limitations define them. Alexander wanted to disappear. His father was talking about him like he was not even there, like he was a trained animal about to perform tricks. This performance is dedicated to the Chen Foundation, Richard continued, which supports programs for people with disabilities. Every dollar we raise tonight will help someone overcome their challenges, just like Alexander has overcome his. The crowd murmured approval. Alexander heard someone say, "How inspiring." Another voice said, "Poor boy, but look how well he's doing." Richard guided Alexander to the piano. It was a beautiful Steinway grand piano, black and shiny. Alexander had played it before, but only when the house was empty. Now with 500 people watching, it felt like a mountain he had to climb. Alexander sat down on the piano bench. His hands were still shaking. He could hear whispers from the crowd. Can he really play without seeing the keys? I heard he's actually quite good. Such a shame about his condition. At least Richard is making the best of a bad situation. Alexander placed his fingers on the keys. The piano was perfectly tuned, much better than the old piano in his room where he usually practiced. But that did not make him feel better. His heart was beating so fast he thought everyone in the room could hear it. He began to play. The first notes of Chopin's Nocturne floated across the silent ballroom. For a moment, Alexander forgot about the crowd. The music took him to a quiet place where only beauty existed. But then someone coughed, and someone else shifted in their chair. Alexander's concentration broke. His fingers stumbled on the keys. A wrong note rang out sharp and ugly in the perfect room. More whispers started. Oh no, he made a mistake. This is uncomfortable to watch. Poor Richard. This must be embarrassing for him. Alexander tried to keep playing, but the wrong note had shattered his confidence. His hands were shaking worse now. Sweat was running down his face. Another wrong note, then another. Someone in the crowd actually giggled. Alexander heard it clearly. A woman's voice trying to hide her laughter behind her hand. But in the quiet room, everyone heard it. More people started whispering. Alexander could hear his father's business partner, Mr. Morrison, talking to someone near the piano. Poor Richard, Mr. Morrison said in a voice that was not as quiet as he thought, stuck with a defective air. Can you imagine trying to run a business empire with that as your successor? At least he's trying, the other person replied. Though I'm not sure this performance is helping anyone. It's painful to watch. Richard should have kept him upstairs. Alexander's fingers froze on the keys. The music stopped in the middle of a phrase, leaving an awful silence in the room. He could not breathe. He could not think. All he could hear were the whispers and the silence and his own heart pounding in his ears. Defective. Air. The words echoed in his mind like a curse. Alexander stood up from the piano bench so fast that it almost fell over. He could hear his father saying something, but the words sounded far away. The crowd was murmuring, confused and uncomfortable. Alexander. Richard's voice was sharp with anger and embarrassment. Sit back down. Finish the piece. But Alexander could not stay there for another second. He felt like he was drowning in a room full of air. His white cane was leaning against the piano. He grabbed it and started walking toward what he hoped was the exit. Alexander, Richard called again. Where are you going? People were talking louder now. Alexander heard fragments of conversations as he passed. What's wrong with him? Is he having some kind of breakdown? This is so awkward. Richard must be mortified. Alexander found the door and escaped into the hallway. But even there, he could hear the voices from the ballroom. The party was continuing without him. People were probably already forgetting about his failed performance and going back to their champagne and business talk. He walked up the stairs to his room as fast as he could. His whole body was shaking. He felt sick and angry and ashamed all at the same time. He had tried so hard to make his father proud, and instead he had embarrassed the whole family in front of the most important people in the city. Alexander threw himself on his bed and buried his face in his pillow. He wanted to cry, but the tears would not come. He just felt empty and broken. About an hour later, Richard came to his room. Alexander could smell the anger on his father like smoke. What was that? Richard's voice was cold and furious. Do you have any idea what you just did? I'm sorry, Alexander whispered. Sorry? Do you think sorry fixes this? Those people downstairs are my business partners, my investors, my friends. They all saw my son fall apart like a child. I tried, Father. I really tried. Trying is not enough. Richard shouted. Winners don't try. Winners succeed. And you failed in front of 500 people who matter. Alexander sat up on his bed. Maybe I'm not meant to be a winner. Maybe I'm just meant to be your defective heir. The room went silent. Richard had not expected Alexander to fight back. Who told you that phrase? Richard asked quietly. I heard Mr. Morrison. He said you were stuck with a defective heir. He said it was painful to watch me. He said you should have kept me upstairs. Richard was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, Morrison is an idiot. But he's not wrong about tonight. You embarrassed yourself in this family? I embarrassed myself? Alexander stood up, anger finally breaking through his shame. You put me on display like a circus animal. You didn't ask if I wanted to perform. You just decided that my life was a tool to make you look good. Everything in this house is a tool to make this family successful, Richard replied, including you. The sooner you understand that, the better. After Richard left, Alexander sat in his room and realized something. He had spent 22 years trying to earn his father's love. But love was not something Richard Chen knew how to give. To Richard, even his own son was just another business asset. For the first time in his life, Alexander started thinking about leaving. Where would he go? What would he do? He had money of his own, a trust fund that his mother had set up before she died. He had never used it because he had never needed anything that his father's money could not buy. But maybe there were things more important than money. Maybe there was a world outside this mansion where people were valued for who they were, not what they could do for others. Alexander did not know that, in just a few hours, he would find the courage to find out. He did not know that his worst night would become the first step toward his best life. For now, he just sat in his golden cage and planned his escape from the only world he had ever known. Alexander waited until the house was completely quiet. The last guest had left 2 hours ago. The servants had finished cleaning up from the party. Even his father had finally gone to bed, probably still angry about the embarrassing performance. It was 3 in the morning when Alexander made his decision. He could not spend another day in this house, pretending to be grateful for a life that felt like a prison. He needed to breathe air that was not filled with disappointment and shame. Alexander had never been outside alone. There had always been a driver or a bodyguard or Maria to watch over him. His father said it was too dangerous for someone like Alexander to walk around the city by himself. But tonight Alexander did not care about danger. He cared about freedom. He dressed in simple clothes, jeans and a t-shirt that did not scream, "Rich boy." He took his white cane and a small amount of cash from his wallet. He did not want to use his credit cards because his father could track them. This had to be a complete escape. Alexander opened his bedroom door and listened. The house was silent except for the soft hum of expensive air conditioning. He walked down the hallway, his feet silent on the thick carpet. He had memorized every inch of this house years ago. He could navigate it perfectly in the darkness that was always his world. The hardest part was getting past the security system. Alexander knew the code because he had heard his father type it in many times. He was good at remembering sounds and patterns. The system beeped softly as he disabled it, and then the front door was open. The night air hit Alexander's face like a cool hand. It smelled different than the filtered air inside the mansion. It smelled like flowers and car exhaust and something else he could not name. It smelled like life. Alexander had never walked on a public sidewalk before. The concrete felt rough under his feet, so different from the smooth marble floors at home. He could hear sounds he had never noticed from inside the house. Cars driving by with music playing, the distant sound of a siren, a dog barking somewhere in the neighborhood. He started walking down the hill from his father's mansion. He did not have a destination in mind. He just wanted to get as far away as possible from that cold, empty house where he felt like a disappointment every day of his life. The first few blocks were easy. Beverly Hills had wide, clean sidewalks and not much traffic at this time of night. Alexander felt like he was flying. For the first time in his life, no one was watching him or worrying about him or feeling sorry for him. He was just a person walking down the street. But as Alexander walked further from his neighborhood, the streets started to change. The sidewalks became more crowded with people, even at this late hour. Alexander could hear different languages being spoken. He could smell food cooking and garbage and car fumes. The sounds were louder and more chaotic than anything he had experienced. Alexander had been walking for over 2 hours when he realized he was lost. Not just a little confused about directions, but completely, hopelessly lost. He had no idea where he was or how to get back home. He had never learned to navigate the city because he had never needed to. His feet were starting to hurt. His fancy shoes were not made for long walks on concrete. He was getting thirsty and he had not thought to bring water. The excitement of escape was turning into fear. Alexander found what felt like a wall and leaned against it to rest. He could hear people talking nearby, but they sounded different from the people he knew. Their voices were rougher, more tired. Some of them sounded angry or sad. "You okay, kid?" a woman's voice asked. She sounded older, like she had lived through many difficult things. "I'm fine," Alexander said quickly. He was not used to strangers talking to him. "You don't look fine. You look lost." Alexander turned toward the voice. "Maybe a little lost. What's a rich boy like you doing in this part of town?" the woman asked. "Your clothes might be simple, but I can tell. You got that soft look about you. Like you never been hungry or cold or scared." Alexander did not know how to answer. He had never been any of those things. "I'm Betty," the woman said. "I've been living on these streets for 5 years." "You running away from home?" "Something like that," Alexander admitted. "Well, you picked a rough place to run to. This ain't Beverly Hills, kid. People here got real problems. They don't got time to help lost rich boys find their way home." Alexander was about to ask Betty for directions when he heard something that made him forget about everything else. Piano music. It was faint, like it was coming from far away, but it was definitely piano music. "Do you hear that?" Alexander asked. "Hear what?" "Piano music. Someone is playing piano." Betty listened for a moment. "Oh, that. Yeah, that's Maya. Crazy girl thinks she's going to be a famous musician someday. She plays that old broken piano at the shelter every night." "What shelter?" "The downtown shelter. Place where people like me sleep when it's too cold to stay outside. They got an old piano in there that nobody uses except Maya." Alexander felt drawn to the music like a magnet. It was not perfect like the performances he had heard at his father's house, but there was something in it that spoke to him. Something real and honest and beautiful. "Can you take me there?" Alexander asked. Betty laughed. "Kid, you sure you want to go to a homeless shelter? It ain't exactly your kind of place. Please, I need to hear that music." Betty studied Alexander for a long moment. "You really are running away, ain't you?" "Okay, kid, I'll take you. But don't say I didn't warn you." They walked through streets that got rougher and more crowded as they went. Alexander could smell things he had never smelled before. Garbage and unwashed bodies and cheap alcohol. He could hear people arguing and laughing and crying. It was like entering a completely different world from the one he had known. The shelter was in an old building that had once been something else. Alexander could tell it was old because of the way the floors creaked and the way sounds echoed in the hallways. Betty led him through a maze of corridors filled with people sleeping on thin mattresses and old couches. And then Alexander heard it clearly. The piano music was coming from somewhere ahead of them. It was not Chopin or Mozart or any of the classical pieces Alexander knew. It was something completely different. Something that sounded like sadness and hope mixed together. "There she is," Betty whispered. "Maya Rodriguez." "Girl's been here off and on for 2 years. Never talks much, but Lord, can she play that piano." Alexander moved closer to the sound. They were in a large room that might have been a cafeteria once. There were folding tables and plastic chairs scattered around. And in one corner, there was an old upright piano that looked like it had seen better days. At the piano sat a young woman about Alexander's age. She had long, dark hair that looked like it had not been washed in a while. Her clothes were old and worn, but she sat at the piano like she belonged there, like it was her throne. Alexander had heard thousands of hours of piano music in his life. He had listened to the greatest pianists in the world perform in concert halls and on expensive sound systems, but he had never heard anything like what this girl was playing. The music seemed to come from somewhere deep inside her. It told a story without words. It spoke of loneliness and pain, but also of dreams that refused to die. Each note was perfectly placed, not because of training, but because of feeling. Maya finished the piece and sat quietly for a moment, her hands still on the keys. That was when she noticed Alexander standing nearby. "Who are you?" she asked. Her voice was suspicious, like she was used to people who meant her harm. "My name is Alex," Alexander said. He did not want to tell her his real last name. "Not yet, you don't belong here," Maya said. "This place is for people who got nowhere else to go." "Maybe I don't have anywhere else to go either," Alexander replied. Maya looked at him more carefully. "You're blind." "Yes, but you're not homeless. Your clothes are too nice. Your hands are too soft." Alexander moved closer to the piano. "Can I sit down? Just for a minute?" Maya hesitated, then slid over on the piano bench to make room. "You play?" "A little." "Play something." Alexander placed his hands on the keys. The piano was old and out of tune, but it still made music. He started to play the same Chopin piece he had tried to perform at his father's party. But this time, in this place, with this girl beside him, it sounded different. It sounded honest. When he finished, Maya was quiet for a long moment. "You play like someone taught you," she said finally. "Proper technique. Expensive lessons. What about you? Where did you learn?" Maya laughed, but it was not a happy sound. "I taught myself. Been playing on any piano I could find since I was 12. Hotel lobbies, music stores, schools. Usually got kicked out before I could finish a song. But you play like what?" "Like the music comes from your soul." Maya looked at Alexander with new interest. "Maybe it does. When you got nothing else, music is all that's left." Alexander understood what she meant. In his big empty house, music had been his only friend too. But Maya's music was different from his. Hers was wild and free and full of life. His was careful and controlled and afraid. "Will you teach me?" Alexander asked suddenly. "Teach you what?" "How to play like that. How to make music that means something." Maya stared at him. "You're serious?" "I've never been more serious about anything in my life. Kid, I don't know who you are or where you come from. But if you want to learn real music, you're going to have to leave, yo." Maya Rodriguez had been living on the streets for 2 years. But she remembered every single day before that like it was yesterday. She had grown up in the foster care system, moving from house to house like a package that nobody really wanted to keep. When she turned 18, the system was done with her. "Good luck," her last social worker had said, handing her a garbage bag full of her few belongings. "You're an adult now." Maya had tried to make it work at first. She got a job washing dishes at a restaurant downtown. She rented a tiny room in a house with 5 other people. But the job paid almost nothing, and when she got sick and missed 3 days of work, they fired her. Without a job, she could not pay rent. Without rent money, she was on the street. That was when Maya discovered that the only thing she was really good at could not pay for food or shelter. She could play piano better than almost anyone, but nobody wanted to hire a 19-year-old girl with no formal training and no home address. Maya had learned to play piano by accident when she was 12 years old. She was living with the Johnson family then, her 15th foster home. Mrs. Johnson had an old piano in the living room that nobody ever touched. One day when the house was empty, Maya sat down and started pressing keys. Something magical happened. The sounds that came from the piano made sense to her in a way that nothing else ever had. She could hear patterns and melodies in her head, and somehow her fingers knew how to find them on the keys. Mrs. Johnson came home and found Maya playing a song she had made up. Instead of being angry, Mrs. Johnson was amazed. "Where did you learn to do that?" she asked. "I don't know," Maya said. "I just could." For 6 months, Maya lived with the Johnsons and played their piano every day after school. She got better and better, learning songs from the radio and making up her own melodies. Mrs. Johnson even talked about getting Maya real piano lessons. But then Mr. Johnson lost his job, and they could not afford to keep a foster child anymore. Maya was moved to another home and there was no piano there. She did not touch piano keys again for 2 years. When she aged out of foster care, Maya discovered that the city was full of pianos if you knew where to look. Hotel lobbies had beautiful grand pianos that were just for decoration most of the time. Music stores had rows of pianos that customers could test. Some restaurants had pianos for atmosphere. Maya became an expert at sneaking piano time. She would walk into a hotel lobby like she belonged there, sit down at the piano and play for as long as she could before security asked her to leave. She learned to dress nicely when she could, to blend in with the paying customers, but it was never enough. Maya needed to play music the way other people needed to breathe, and living on the streets made it harder and harder to find opportunities to play. That was how she discovered the shelter piano. The downtown homeless shelter had been donated an old upright piano years ago. It was out of tune and missing some keys, but it still made music. Most people ignored it, but Maya fell in love with it immediately. The shelter workers let her play as long as she was quiet and did not disturb the other residents. Maya usually played late at night when most people were asleep. The piano became her church, her therapy, her best friend. Maya had been playing at the shelter for 6 months when the rich boy showed up. She knew he was rich the moment she saw him. It was not just his clothes, although they were obviously expensive even when he tried to dress down. It was the way he moved, like he had never had to worry about where his next meal was coming from. It was the softness of his hands when he played piano, hands that had never done hard labor. But there was something else about Alex that Maya could not figure out. When he played piano, he played with perfect technique but no soul. Like someone had taught him all the right moves but none of the feelings behind them. "You play like a robot," Maya told him after his first attempt at the Chopin piece. Alex looked hurt. "I've been taking lessons since I was 5. "That's your problem. You learned to play music the way rich people think music should sound, pretty and perfect and empty. Then teach me to play it differently." Maya had never taught anyone anything before. She barely understood how she played piano herself. It was all instinct and feeling, but something about Alex made her want to try. "First lesson," Maya said, "forget everything you think you know about music." "I can't just forget years of training." "Yes, you can. Here, put your hands on the keys but don't play anything yet." Alex placed his hands in perfect position, thumbs curved, wrists straight, exactly like his expensive teachers had taught him. "Wrong," Maya said. "Your hands look like they're afraid of the piano. Like they're trying to be polite." "How should they look?" Maya put her own hands on the keys. Her hands were smaller than Alex's, with calluses from the hard work she had done to survive. But when she touched the piano, it was like she was greeting an old friend. "Feel the keys," Maya said. "Don't just touch them. Feel what they want to tell you." "Keys don't want to tell me anything. They're just pieces of wood and metal. See? That's your problem. You think music is just about playing the right notes at the right time, but real music is about telling a story, about sharing something true." Maya started playing a song she had made up the week before. It was about being hungry and cold and scared, but also about hope, about believing that tomorrow might be better than today. "Now you try," Maya said when she finished. "But don't play any song you know. Make something up. Play something that tells me who you really are." Alex hesitated. "I don't know how to make up songs. Everyone knows how." "You just forgot. Close your eyes. Oh wait, you don't need to do that." Maya realized what she had said and felt embarrassed. But Alex just smiled. "It's okay. I'm used to people forgetting I'm blind. Sometimes I forget too." "How can you forget something like that? When I'm playing music, I don't feel blind. I just feel normal." "Then play me normal. Play me what it feels like to be you." Alex put his fingers on the keys and started playing something Maya had never heard before. It was hesitant at first, like he was not sure what he was doing. But slowly the music began to tell a story. It was a story about loneliness, about feeling trapped in a beautiful cage, about wanting to be loved for who you were instead of what you could do for other people. The music was sad but also brave, like someone learning to hope for the first time. When Alex finished, Maya was quiet for a long moment. "That was better," she said finally. "Better than what?" "Better than anything I heard rich people play before." Over the next few weeks, Alex came to the shelter every night. He told people at home that he was attending business meetings downtown. Maya did not ask questions about his other life. She could tell he was running from something just like she was. Maya began teaching Alex everything she knew about real music. She showed him how to play with his whole body, not just his fingers. She taught him to listen to the spaces between the notes, which were sometimes more important than the notes themselves. "Music is not about being perfect," Maya explained one night as they sat at the old piano. "It's about being honest. But I was always taught that mistakes were bad. That sloppy playing was unacceptable. Forget what you were taught. Some of the most beautiful music comes from happy accidents." Maya played a song and deliberately hit a wrong note in the middle, but instead of stopping, she turned the mistake into something new. The wrong note became the beginning of a different melody, something even more beautiful than what she had started with. "How did you do that?" Alex asked. "I listened to what the piano wanted to tell me instead of forcing it to say what I wanted." Alex was a fast learner. He had good ears and strong hands from years of training. But more importantly, he was hungry for something real. He was tired of playing music that sounded pretty but felt empty. Maya started teaching him songs she had made up. Songs about life on the streets, songs about dreams that seemed impossible, songs about finding beauty in broken things. "Play this like you've been hungry," Maya said, showing him a melody she had written after 3 days with no food. "I've never been hungry." "Then imagine it. What would it feel like to want something so badly that your whole body hurt?" Alex thought for a moment, then started playing. But this time he was not thinking about hunger for food. He was thinking about hunger for acceptance, for love, for a place where he belonged. The music that came from his fingers was different than anything he had played before. It was raw and real and full of longing. "Yes," Maya said when he finished. "That's what I'm talking about. That's music that means something." As the weeks went by, Maya began to see changes in Alex. He was less careful, less afraid of making mistakes. He laughed more. He asked questions about her life, and he actually listened to the answers. Maya also started to feel something she had not felt in a long time. She started to feel like she had a friend. Most people looked at Maya and saw a homeless girl who was probably dangerous or crazy. They crossed the street when they saw her coming. They pretended not to hear when she asked for help, but Alex looked at her and saw a teacher. Someone with something valuable to offer. For the first time in her life, Maya felt like she was good at something that mattered to someone else. "Why did you start playing piano?" Alex asked one night. Maya thought about the question. "I guess because it was the only thing." 3 weeks had passed since Alexander first walked into the downtown shelter, and his life felt completely different. Every night he told his father he was attending business meetings or networking events. Richard seemed pleased that his son was finally taking an interest in the business world, so he never asked for details. But Alexander was not learning about business. He was learning about life. Maya had become more than just his music teacher. She had become his window into a world he never knew existed. Through her, Alexander discovered that there were people who valued authenticity over wealth, creativity over status, and kindness over power. "Tell me about your real life," Maya said one night as they sat at the old piano. They had been working on a song Maya had written about second chances, and Alexander was finally starting to play it with real feeling. "What do you mean?" Alexander asked, though he knew exactly what she meant. "I mean your life when you're not here. Where do you live? What do you do all day? Why do you have such soft hands and expensive clothes?" Alexander had been dreading this conversation. He liked that Maya saw him as just Alex, not as the disappointing son of a billionaire. But he was starting to feel guilty about lying to her. "It's complicated," Alexander said. "Most things are. But I told you about foster care and living on the streets. Don't you think you owe me some honesty?" Alexander took a deep breath. "My father is successful, very successful, and he's not happy that I'm blind." "What kind of successful?" "The kind where people know his name. Where he has more money than he could spend in 10 lifetimes. Maya was quiet for a long moment. "How successful?" "Richard Chen successful." Maya's hands froze on the piano keys. "Richard Chen? The tech billionaire? The one who owns Chen Industries?" "Yes." "Oh my God." Maya stood up from the piano bench so fast it almost tipped over. "You're Alexander Chen. You're the heir to one of the biggest fortunes in America." "Yes, but Maya, listen to me." "No, you listen to me." Maya's voice was angry, but Alexander could hear hurt underneath the anger. "Do you have any idea who your father is? Do you know what his companies have done?" Alexander felt confused. "What do you mean?" "Chen Industries bought the apartment building where I lived when I was 16. They kicked out all the tenants so they could tear it down and build luxury condos. That's how my foster family lost their home. That's why I had to move again." Alexander felt like someone had punched him in the stomach. "Maya, I didn't know." "Of course you didn't know. Rich people never know what their money does to regular people. You probably never thought about where your father's profits come from." "That's not fair. I'm not responsible for every business decision my father makes, aren't you? You live in a mansion paid for by that money. You eat food bought with that money. You wear clothes bought with that money." Alexander wanted to argue, but he knew Maya was right. He had benefited from his father's business empire his whole life without ever thinking about the cost. "So what now?" Alexander asked quietly. "Do you want me to leave?" Maya was quiet for a long time. When she spoke again, her voice was softer. "I should want you to leave. I should hate you for who your family is. But But you're not your father. These past few weeks, watching you learn real music, seeing you care about something besides money and status. You're different than I expected. I don't want to be like my father. Then don't be. Maya sat back down at the piano bench, but she did not look at Alexander. There's something else you need to know about me. What? I know who you are now, so I know you probably recognize my last name too. Rodriguez. Alexander searched his memory. The name did sound familiar, but he could not place it. 5 years ago, Maya continued, there was a big lawsuit against Chen Industries. A man named Carlos Rodriguez sued your father's company for wrongful termination. He said they fired him because he tried to organize a union. Now Alexander remembered. It had been in the news for months. His father had been angry about the bad publicity. Carlos Rodriguez was my father, Maya said quietly. Alexander felt the world spinning around him. Your father sued my father? My father worked for Chen Industries for 15 years. He was a good employee, never missed work, never caused trouble. But when he saw how badly the company was treating its workers, he tried to help them organize for better conditions. What happened? Your father had him fired. Then he made sure my father couldn't get a job anywhere else in the industry. My father lost everything. His job, his savings, his health insurance. When he couldn't find work, he started drinking. When he started drinking, my mother left him. Alexander did not know what to say. He had never heard this version of the story. My father died 3 years ago, Maya continued. Liver failure from all the drinking. He never got over what your father did to him. Maya, I'm so sorry. I had no idea. The worst part is that your father probably doesn't even remember my father's name. Destroying someone's life was just another business decision to him. They sat in silence for several minutes. Alexander felt ashamed and angry and confused all at the same time. He was ashamed of his father's actions, angry that he had never been told the truth, and confused about what this meant for his friendship with Maya. I understand if you don't want to see me anymore, Alexander said finally. I should not want to see you anymore, Maya replied. By all rights, I should hate everything about you. But hate is exhausting, and revenge doesn't bring back the dead. Maya started playing a soft melody on the old piano. It was sad but also peaceful, like a lullaby for broken hearts. Besides, Maya said as she played, you're not the one who hurt my family, and walking away from you won't change anything that happened. So what do we do now? Maya stopped playing and looked at Alexander directly. We keep making music, but no more lies between us. If we're going to be friends, it has to be honest friendship. I want that too. Good. Because I have an idea. What kind of idea? Maya's eyes lit up with a fire Alexander had never seen before. What if we used your name and my music to do something good? What if we showed people that real art can come from anywhere? What do you mean? I mean, maybe it's time for Alexander Chen to stop hiding in the shadows. Maybe it's time for you to use your privilege for something meaningful. Alexander felt scared and excited at the same time. My father would never allow it. Your father doesn't own you. You're 22 years old. You can make your own choices. But I don't know how to live without his approval. Then it's time to learn. Over the next few nights, Maya and Alexander began working on something new. Not just individual songs, but a complete musical collaboration. Maya would write the melodies and lyrics, drawing from her experiences on the streets and in foster care. Alexander would arrange the music and add classical elements, bringing together their two very different musical backgrounds. The songs they created together were unlike anything either of them had made before. They told stories about inequality and injustice, but also about hope and resilience. They combined Maya's raw emotional honesty with Alexander's technical skill. This could actually work, Maya said one night after they finished a particularly powerful song about homelessness. People need to hear music like this. But how would we ever perform it? I can't exactly bring you to one of my father's charity events. Why not? Alexander laughed. Maya, you've never seen one of those events. They're full of people who think poverty is a personal failing. They would never listen to music about social justice. Maybe that's exactly why they need to hear it. It would be social suicide. My father would disown me. Would that be such a bad thing? Alexander thought about it. Would it really be so terrible to be free from his father's expectations? Would it be so awful to stop trying to earn love from someone who might not be capable of giving it? I've been thinking about something, Alexander said. About what you said before about using my privilege for something meaningful. What about it? What if we didn't just perform together? What if we started something bigger? A program to teach music to homeless kids? A foundation that actually helps people instead of just making rich people feel good about themselves? Maya stared at Alexander. You're serious? I have access to money that I never asked for and don't really need. My mother left me a trust fund that I've never touched. What if we used it to do something real? Your father would never allow it. My father doesn't control my mother's money. And I'm tired of living my life based on what he will and won't allow. Maya was quiet for a long time, thinking about Alexander's proposal. Finally, she spoke. If we do this, there's no going back. Your father will probably try to destroy us both. Then we'll have to be stronger than he is. Are you ready for that kind of fight? Alexander thought about all the years he had spent trying to be the son his father wanted. All the piano lessons and business courses and charity events where he felt like a performing monkey. All the nights he had gone to bed feeling like a disappointment. I'm ready, he said. Then let's do it. That night, Alexander and Maya shook hands over the old piano in the homeless shelter. They had no idea how they were going to accomplish their dream. They had no idea what obstacles they would face or what sacrifices they would have to make. But they had something more powerful than money or connections. They had friendship based on honesty. They had music. Richard Chen was not a man who missed details. He had built his business empire by paying attention to small things that other people overlooked. So when his son started disappearing every night for 3 weeks, claiming to attend business meetings that never appeared on any calendar, Richard decided to investigate. At first, Richard was pleased that Alexander seemed to be taking an interest in the business world. His son had been withdrawn and moody since the disastrous piano performance at the charity gala. The nightly meetings seemed like a positive development. But when Richard tried to follow up on Alexander's supposed business contacts, he found nothing. No one in his network had seen Alexander at any meetings. No one had scheduled appointments with him. It was as if Alexander was attending meetings that did not exist. Richard hired Marcus Webb, a private investigator who had worked for the Chen family before. Webb was discreet and thorough, exactly the kind of man who could follow someone without being noticed. I want to know where my son goes every night, Richard told Webb. I want to know who he talks to and what he does. And I want to know without him finding out about it. Webb had been following people for 20 years. Following a blind young man should have been easy, but Alexander had developed good instincts during his weeks of sneaking out. He changed his routes, took unexpected turns, and seemed to sense when someone was behind him. It took Webb 5 nights to track Alexander to the downtown homeless shelter. When he saw the elegant, well-dressed young man walk into the rundown building full of society's most desperate people, Webb thought he had made a mistake. But there was no mistake. Alexander Chen, heir to a billion-dollar fortune, was spending his nights in a homeless shelter. And he was not there to volunteer or hand out food. He was there to play piano with a homeless girl who looked like she had not had a decent meal in months. Webb took photos and videos through the shelter's windows. He recorded Alexander and the girl playing music together, laughing together, talking like old friends. He watched Alexander give the girl money from his wallet. He saw them embrace like they cared about each other. When Webb delivered his report to Richard Chen, the billionaire's face went through several different emotions. First surprise, then confusion, then anger, and finally cold fury. Are you certain about this? Richard asked, looking at the photos Webb had taken. Absolutely certain, Mr. Chen. Your son has been visiting this shelter every night for 3 weeks. He spends most of his time with this particular girl, Maya Rodriguez. Richard's eyes narrowed when he heard the name Rodriguez. Run a background check on this girl. I want to know everything about her. Webb's background report on Maya Rodriguez made Richard's anger turn into something much more dangerous. When he learned that Maya was the daughter of Carlos Rodriguez, the man who had sued Chen Industries 5 years earlier, Richard saw conspiracy everywhere. She's using him, Richard told his assistant the next morning. This girl has targeted my son specifically because of who his father is. She's probably planning to blackmail us or sue us or damage our reputation. Richard's assistant, Janet Morrison, was not sure about that theory. Sir, from what the investigator observed, they seem to genuinely care about each other. Maybe it's just a coincidence. There are no coincidences in business, Janet. This girl is running a con, and my naive son has fallen for it completely. Richard spent the day planning his response. He considered having Maya arrested on false charges, but that might create unwanted publicity. He considered bribing her to leave town, but that would give her power over the family. He considered threatening her, but that could backfire if Alexander found out. Finally, Richard decided on the most direct approach. He would confront his son and the girl together. He would expose Maya's true motives in front of Alexander, and then his son would finally see reason. That night, Richard arrived at the homeless shelter with 2 security guards and a photographer. He wanted documentation of everything, in case he needed it later for legal proceedings. The shelter director, an elderly man named Father Miguel, tried to stop Richard at the door. "Sir, this is a private facility. You can't just walk in here with security guards." "My son is in this building," Richard said coldly. "I'm taking him home." "Even if that's true, sir, we don't allow disruptions. Our residents need peace and safety." Richard pushed past Father Miguel like he was not there. Rich men like Richard Chen were used to getting their way through intimidation and force. The security guards followed him, and the photographer started taking pictures. Richard found Alexander and Maya in the main room, sitting at the old piano. They were working on a song together, their heads close together as Maya showed Alexander a new melody. They looked comfortable and happy, like they belonged together. "Alexander," Richard's voice boomed across the room, causing everyone in the shelter to look up in alarm. Alexander's face went white. "Father, how did you find me here?" "I had you followed." "Did you really think you could lie to me indefinitely?" Alexander stood up from the piano bench, his body tense with fear and anger. "You had me followed? I'm 22 years old, Father. I don't need a babysitter." "Apparently you do, if this is how you spend your time when left to your own devices." Richard looked at Maya with disgust. She was small and thin, with clothes that had seen better days. Her hair needed washing, and her shoes had holes in them. To Richard, she looked like everything he despised about poverty: weakness, failure, and need. "You must be Maya Rodriguez," Richard said. "Daughter of Carlos Rodriguez." Maya stood up slowly, her chin raised defiantly. "Yes, I am. I thought so. You look just like your father, like someone who blames other people for their failures." "Don't talk about my father," Maya said quietly, but there was steel in her voice. "Your father was a troublemaker who tried to destroy my company from the inside. When that failed, he sued us for money he never earned. And now his daughter is trying to seduce my son for the same reason." Alexander stepped between his father and Maya. "That's enough, Father. Maya is not trying to seduce anyone. She's my friend." "Friend?" Richard laughed harshly. "Alexander, this girl has targeted you specifically because of who your family is. She's using you." "That's not true." "Isn't it? What are the odds that you would randomly meet the daughter of a man who sued our family? What are the odds that she would befriend you without knowing who you are?" Alexander felt doubt creeping into his mind. He turned to look at Maya. "Maya, tell him he's wrong. Tell him you didn't know who I was when we met." Maya's silence was answer enough. Alexander felt like the ground was falling away beneath his feet. "You knew?" Alexander asked quietly. "You knew who I was from the beginning?" "Alex, let me explain. You knew who my father was. You knew about the lawsuit. You knew everything, and you never told me. I found out after we became friends, and I chose to keep being your friend anyway." Richard stepped forward triumphantly. "You see? She's been lying to you from day one. This whole friendship has been a performance designed to get close to our family." "That's not true," Maya said, her voice breaking. "I care about Alex. I care about him more than anyone else in my life." "Of course you do," Richard said sarcastically. "He's worth billions of dollars." Alexander felt sick. Everything he thought he knew about his friendship with Maya was crumbling. Had she really been using him? Had their music together meant nothing to her? "Alexander, we're leaving," Richard said. "Now. I'm not going anywhere until I get some answers." Alexander turned to Maya again. "How long have you known who I was?" "I figured it out after about a week." "When you told me your last name was Chen, and you didn't think to tell me?" "I was afraid you would leave. I was afraid you would think I was only interested in your money." "Maybe you were." Maya looked like Alexander had slapped her. "How can you say that? After everything we've shared? After all the music we've made together?" "I don't know what to believe anymore." Richard put his hand on Alexander's shoulder. "Son, this girl has been manipulating you from the beginning. She saw a lonely, vulnerable young man and she took advantage of him. Stop talking about me like I'm not here." Maya shouted. And stop acting like you know anything about what Alex and I have together. What you have together is nothing, Richard said coldly. You're a homeless girl with no education, no prospects, and no value to anyone. My son is heir to a fortune that you could never comprehend. You exist in completely different worlds. Maybe that's true, Maya said, her voice shaking with anger and hurt. But in my world, people care about each other for who they are, not what they're worth. In my world, friendship means something real. Your world is a fantasy, Richard replied. In the real world, people like you serve people like us. That's the natural order. Alexander listened to his father's words and felt ashamed. Not ashamed of Maya, but ashamed of the family he came from. Ashamed of the money that had been built on the suffering of people like Maya's father. Father, you're wrong, Alexander said quietly. Excuse me? You're wrong about Maya, you're wrong about friendship. And you're wrong about the natural order. Richard's face darkened. Alexander, you're coming home with me right now. This conversation is over. No, it's not over. Maya, I need to ask you something, and I need you to tell me the truth. Maya nodded, tears running down her cheeks. The morning after the confrontation at the homeless shelter, Alexander woke up in his childhood bedroom for what he knew would be the last time. His father had not spoken to him during the silent ride home the night before, but Alexander could feel Richard's anger like heat from a fire. Alexander was packing his few important belongings when Richard entered the room without knocking. We need to talk, Richard said. His voice was cold and controlled, which was somehow more frightening than if he had been shouting. I think we said everything we needed to say last night. No, Alexander. Last night was emotional. Today we're going to discuss this situation like rational adults. Alexander continued packing his Braille books into a suitcase. There's nothing to discuss. I've made my choice. You've made a mistake. But mistakes can be corrected. Richard sat down in the expensive chair by Alexander's window. I've been thinking about your friendship with this girl. I understand the appeal. You've been lonely and she gave you attention, but you need to understand what's really happening here. I understand perfectly. I found someone who sees me as a person instead of a disappointment. She sees you as a bank account with legs. Alexander slammed his suitcase shut. Why can't you accept that someone might actually care about me? Because I know how the world works and you don't. Maya Rodriguez is not your friend. She's an opportunist who has identified you as her ticket to a better life. Even if that were true, which it's not, why would it matter? At least she makes me happy. Richard was quiet for a moment, studying his son's face. You really believe you love her? I do love her. As a friend, as a teacher, as the only person who has ever accepted me exactly as I am. Then let's test that love. Alexander turned toward his father's voice. What do you mean? I'm proposing a challenge. You and your homeless girlfriend will perform together at the next Chen Foundation Gala, in front of the same 500 people who witnessed your humiliation last month. Alexander felt his stomach drop. You want us to perform? Why? Because I want to prove to you that this girl is using you. I want to show you what happens when someone with no training, no education, and no class tries to perform for people who matter. Maya is an incredible musician. Playing piano in a homeless shelter is not the same as performing for society's elite. When she fails in front of those people, you'll see her for what she really is. Alexander was quiet, thinking about his father's proposal. It sounded like a trap, but it might also be an opportunity. What are the terms of this challenge? Alexander asked. Simple. You and Maya will perform one song together at the gala next month. If the audience responds positively, if they give you a genuine standing ovation, then I'll respect your friendship with her. I'll even fund whatever charitable project you two are dreaming about. And if they don't respond positively, then you'll never see Maya Rodriguez again. You'll take your place in the family business and you'll marry someone appropriate from our social circle. Alexander felt like he was standing on the edge of a cliff. And if I refuse to accept this challenge, then I'll use every resource at my disposal to destroy that girl's life. I'll have her arrested for trespassing, fraud, whatever I can make stick. I'll make sure she never finds work anywhere in this city. I'll make her life so miserable that she'll disappear from yours voluntarily. The threat was delivered in Richard's calm, businesslike tone, which made it even more terrifying. Alexander knew his father was capable of following through on every word. You would really do that? You would destroy an innocent person just to control me? I would do anything to protect my son from making a mistake that would ruin his life. Alexander realized this was not really about Maya at all. This was about power. Richard could not tolerate the idea that his son might choose a different path than the one he had planned. "I accept your challenge," Alexander said. "Excellent. The gala is in 4 weeks. That should give you enough time to prepare. Assuming your girlfriend is actually capable of performing at that level." After Richard left, Alexander sat on his bed and tried to process what had just happened. He had agreed to put Maya in front of 500 wealthy people who would be looking for any excuse to reject her. People who had already heard Richard's version of their relationship and would be expecting her to fail. But maybe this was exactly what Maya needed. A chance to show the world that real music could come from anywhere. A chance to prove that talent and heart mattered more than training and money. Alexander called a taxi and went to the shelter to find Maya. She was in the main room, helping serve breakfast to the other residents. When she saw Alexander, her face lit up with relief. "Alex, I wasn't sure you would come back after last night. We need to talk." Alexander told Maya about his father's challenge. As he explained the terms, he watched her face go through the same emotions he had felt: fear, anger, and finally determination. "So if we fail, you'll never be allowed to see me again?" Maya asked. "That's what he said. And if we succeed, he'll fund our music program for homeless kids? He'll fund whatever project we want." Maya was quiet for a long time, thinking about the challenge. "Alex, you know those people will hate me before I even start playing, right? I'm everything they're afraid of. Poor, homeless, uneducated. I know. But you're also everything they've forgotten how to be: authentic, passionate, and real. What if I freeze up? What if I can't play in front of all those people? Then we'll fail together." "But Maya, what if you don't freeze up? What if you show them something they've never seen before?" Maya walked over to the old piano and played a few notes. The instrument sounded worse than ever, like it was falling apart. "We can't practice on this piano for a performance like that," Maya said. "Those people will expect perfection. Then we'll find somewhere else to practice." "Where?" "I can't exactly walk into a music store and ask to use their grand piano for 4 weeks. Alexander smiled. "Actually, you can. My mother left me money that my father can't touch. We'll rent a practice space with a real piano. Alex, that could cost thousands of dollars. So, what good is money if we don't use it for something important?" Over the next few days, Alexander and Maya found a small music studio downtown that rented practice rooms by the month. The room came with a beautiful baby grand piano that was perfectly tuned and maintained. The first time Maya sat down at the good piano, she almost cried. Her fingers moved across the keys like she was greeting a long-lost friend. The sound was rich and clear, nothing like the broken piano at the shelter. "This is what you're used to playing, isn't it?" Maya asked. "Yes, but I never appreciated it until I heard you play on that old upright piano. You made broken keys sound like magic." "What should we play for your father's people?" Maya asked. "Something that tells our story, something that shows them who we really are." They spent hours every day working on their performance piece. Maya suggested they create something new, a song that combined both of their musical backgrounds and told the story of their unlikely friendship. The song they wrote together was unlike anything either of them had created before. It started with Alexander playing a classical melody that sounded like loneliness and privilege. Then Maya joined in with a harmony that spoke of struggle and hope. As the song progressed, their two musical voices began to blend and support each other, creating something more beautiful than either could achieve alone. "It's perfect," Maya said after they played through the complete song for the first time. "It's us. Do you think we can pull this off in front of 500 people? I don't know, but I know we have to try." As the weeks passed, Alexander noticed changes in Maya. The regular meals and the chance to shower at the practice studio had improved her health and confidence. But more than that, having a real piano to play had awakened something in her. She was composing new music every day, pieces that were more complex and sophisticated than anything she had written before. "You're getting better," Alexander told her one afternoon. "I'm getting the chance to be better. That old piano at the shelter was holding me back. I had so much music in my head that I couldn't express properly. What will you do after the performance? Win or lose, you can't go back to living at the shelter. Not after this." Maya had been thinking about the same thing. "I don't know. I've been homeless for so long I don't remember what it's like to have a real home. You could stay with me. I'm going to get my own apartment after this, regardless of what happens with my father." "Alex," people would talk. A rich white boy and a homeless Latina girl living together. The gossip would destroy both of us. I don't care about gossip. You should. Your father would use it against us. 2 weeks before the performance, Alexander got unexpected news. His father had been spreading the word about the challenge throughout their social circle. Everyone who mattered in the city knew that Alexander Chen was going to perform with a homeless girl at the charity gala. They're taking bets, Alexander told Maya after hearing from a family friend. Some people are betting on how badly we'll fail. That's sick. That's my father's world. Everything is a competition, even other people's happiness. Like, are you having second thoughts? Maya asked. No, are you? Every day. But I'm not backing down. The night before the performance, Alexander and Maya sat in there. The Chen Foundation Gala was the social event of the year. 500 of the most powerful people in Los Angeles filled the ballroom of the Beverly Hills Hotel. Politicians, business leaders, celebrities, and socialites all came dressed in their finest clothes, ready to see and be seen. But tonight was different. Tonight everyone was talking about the challenge between Richard Chen and his blind son. Word had spread through the city's elite circles about Alexander's friendship with a homeless girl and his father's ultimatum. I heard she's never performed for more than 10 people at a time, whispered Mrs. Patterson, the wife of a federal judge. Richard is doing this to teach his son a lesson, replied Senator Morrison. The boy needs to learn that charity work doesn't mean befriending the people you're supposed to help. It's brilliant, really, added Dr. Williams, a prominent surgeon. Once this girl embarrasses herself in front of everyone, Alexander will come to his senses. Maya stood in a small room backstage wearing a simple black dress that Alexander had bought for her. It was the nicest thing she had ever owned, but she felt like she was wearing a costume. Through the thin wall, she could hear the crowd talking and laughing, waiting for the show to begin. I can't do this, Maya whispered to Alexander. There are too many people. They all hate me before I even start. Alexander took her hands in his. Maya, listen to me. Those people out there think they know what music should sound like. They think it should be pretty and polite and safe. You're going to show them something real. What if I forget the words? What if my voice cracks? What if... Then we'll figure it out together. Maya, you've been performing your whole life. Every time you played piano in a hotel lobby or on the street, you were performing. The only difference tonight is that people are actually going to listen. Richard Chen walked onto the stage to introduce the evening's entertainment. The crowd fell silent, waiting to see what the billionaire had planned for his rebellious son. Ladies and gentlemen, Richard began, tonight we have a very special performance. My son Alexander has been working with a young woman named Maya Rodriguez to prepare a musical piece for your enjoyment. The crowd murmured with anticipation. Everyone knew this was more than just entertainment. Miss Rodriguez comes from a very different background than most of us, Richard continued. She represents the kind of person our foundation aims to help. Tonight, she and Alexander will demonstrate what can be achieved when privilege meets potential. The way Richard said the word potential made it clear he did not believe Maya had any. Please welcome Alexander Chen and Maya Rodriguez. The crowd applauded politely as Alexander and Maya walked onto the stage. Alexander looked confident in his expensive tuxedo, but Maya looked terrified. She was small and thin, and the stage lights made her look even younger than her 19 years. Some people in the audience gasped when they saw her. They had expected someone more presentable. Maya looked exactly like what she was, a homeless girl who had been given a bath and a nice dress but was still completely out of place in this world. Alexander and Maya sat down at the beautiful Steinway grand piano, the same piano where Alexander had failed so spectacularly a month earlier. But this time he was not alone. Are you ready? Alexander whispered to Maya. Maya looked out at 500 faces staring at her with curiosity, pity, and barely hidden contempt. She thought about her father, who had died believing that people like the Chens would always win. She thought about all the homeless kids at the shelter who had dreams but no opportunities. I'm ready, Maya said. Alexander began playing the opening notes of their song. The melody was haunting and beautiful, speaking of loneliness and longing. The crowd fell silent, listening to music that was more complex and emotional than they had expected. Then Maya began to sing. Her voice was not trained or perfect. It had rough edges and raw power that no amount of expensive lessons could create. She sang about two people from different worlds finding friendship in the darkness. She sang about the courage it took to be real in a world that rewarded pretense. As the song progressed, Alexander and Maya's voices began to blend together. His classical training provided structure and sophistication, while her natural talent provided soul and authenticity. The music told the story of their friendship, their struggles, and their hope for a better world. The audience was completely silent. This was not what they had expected. They had come to watch a homeless girl embarrass herself, but instead they were witnessing something extraordinary. The music was professional quality, but it was also deeply personal and moving. Maya sang the final verse alone, her voice growing stronger and more confident with each word. She sang about finding your voice even when the world tells you to be silent. She sang about the power of music to change hearts and minds. When the song ended, the ballroom was completely quiet. Not a single person moved or spoke. Maya and Alexander sat at the piano, waiting for the reaction that would determine their fate. And then, slowly, someone started clapping. It was Dr. Sarah Kim, a pediatric surgeon who worked with underprivileged children. She stood up from her table and applauded with tears running down her face. Within seconds, other people began standing and clapping. The applause spread through the room like wildfire until all 500 guests were on their feet, giving Maya and Alexander a thunderous standing ovation. The ovation lasted for more than 5 minutes. People were not just clapping politely. They were genuinely moved by what they had witnessed. Some were crying. Others were shouting bravo and magnificent. Maya sat at the piano in shock. She had never experienced anything like this in her life. All those years of playing for empty hotel lobbies and hostile security guards, dreaming of a moment when people would really listen to her music. And now it was happening. Alexander reached over and squeezed Maya's hand. "You did it," he whispered. "You showed them." Richard Chen stood at the side of the stage, watching the crowd give his son and the homeless girl the kind of ovation usually reserved for world-famous performers. His face was a mask of controlled emotion, but inside he was experiencing something he had not felt in years: genuine surprise. Richard had been certain that Maya would fail. He had been sure that putting her in front of his sophisticated friends would expose her as a fraud, but the crowd's reaction was unmistakable. Maya Rodriguez was not a fraud. She was the real thing. When the applause finally died down, Richard walked back onto the stage. He looked at his son and Maya, then turned to address the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen," Richard said, his voice carrying a note of humility that surprised everyone who knew him, "I think we have all witnessed something extraordinary tonight." The crowd murmured agreement. "I proposed this performance as a challenge to my son, who believed that talent and heart were more important than training and privilege. Tonight you have all voted with your applause. My son was right and I was wrong." Richard turned to face Alexander and Maya directly. "Miss Rodriguez, I owe you an apology. I misjudged you based on your circumstances rather than your character and abilities. I hope you can forgive a stubborn old man for his prejudices." Maya stared at Richard in amazement. This was not the same cold, hostile man who had confronted her at the shelter. "Alexander," Richard continued, "I have spent your entire life trying to make you into a copy of myself, but tonight I realize that you are already something much better than I ever was. You have compassion, integrity, and the courage to follow your convictions, even when it costs you everything." Alexander felt tears running down his face. He had waited his whole life to hear his father say he was proud of him. "The Chen Foundation will be honored to fund whatever musical program you and Miss Rodriguez choose to create," Richard announced to the crowd. "And I will be honored to support my son in any endeavor that brings this kind of beauty and truth into the world." The crowd erupted in applause again, but this time it was for Richard's unexpected grace and wisdom. Over the following months, Alexander and Maya used the foundation money to create the Rodriguez Chen Music Academy, a program that provided free music lessons and instruments to homeless and at-risk youth throughout Los Angeles. Maya became the Academy's artistic director, developing a curriculum that combined classical training with emotional expression. She proved to be a natural teacher, helping dozens of young people discover their own musical voices. Alexander served as the Academy's executive director, using his business skills and family connections to expand the program throughout California. He never did take over his father's company, but he built something more meaningful, an organization that changed lives through music. The Academy's first graduation concert was held in the same ballroom where Maya and Alexander had first performed together. This time, 50 young musicians from the streets of Los Angeles played for an audience that included many of the same wealthy patrons who had witnessed Maya's debut. Richard Chen sat in the front row, watching his son conduct a youth orchestra made up of kids who had been written off by society. For the first time in his life, Richard understood that some things were more valuable than money. After the concert, Richard approached Maya backstage. "Miss Rodriguez," he said formally, "I wanted to thank you." "Thank me for what, Mr. Chen?"